Hello and welcome to another episode of the RevRx Podcast, where we discuss how to thrive in faith, family, and health. My name is Chad Potts, and I'm your host. Today's episode is a very special one, not only because it features some of my family, and not only because it's the very first episode I've recorded on location somewhere, but because it deals with something that's very near and dear to my heart. You see, October is National Down Syndrome Awareness Month, and I'm going to sit down with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Sarah and William Robinson, because they have quite a phenomenal story. You see, they have twin girls, Katie and Madison, and they both have Down syndrome. We're going to talk about how this wasn't even on their radar 6 years ago, but we're going to see the faithfulness of God every step of the way along their journey. We're going to see how God has equipped them and prepared them to not only handle the challenges and difficulties that come along with raising their family, but they've also become advocates for special needs. You're going to want to listen to this episode to the very end because Sarah and William share with us some raw emotions and the real life story of what it looks like to raise special needs children. And we're going to talk about how there's a seat at the table for everybody and how they're working so hard to make that a reality. So with much excitement, I introduce to you Sarah and William Robinson. Hello and welcome to another episode of the RevRx Podcast, our very first episode where we're recording on site here in sunny Arizona with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law. So excited for you guys to meet Sarah and William Robinson. They're going to share their story today and a little bit about something that's kind of near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's Down syndrome awareness and special needs awareness. And so excited, Sarah and William, to have you here on the show with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. I'd love to just ask my guest to tell me kind of what got you to this point. I know that's kind of a loaded question. How did you get to the place where you are today? But you're ministering. Both of you are co-pastors. And just love to hear that story. And then introduce to us a little bit about your children and kind of what brought you into the world of special needs.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's safe to say, speak for William here, that when we got married nearly 10 years ago, we never would have envisioned ourselves in the position we're in
sure,
now.
Not in a million years.
Yeah, not in a million years. But God has been faithful, and that's kind of the story that's been written through our lives these last 32 years for me, and the last 10 years of our marriage for sure. It's just a message of God's faithfulness. So I'll just dive right into kind of our story, our journey into parenthood.
Sure.
Almost 6 years ago now, we found out that we were pregnant with twins, and all the new parent things. We're very excited about becoming parents and excited about this whole journey. Went through all of the pregnancy, totally normal. Nothing seemed to be amiss at all. And then we got to about 36 weeks of pregnancy, and they said that twin A, who was in the bottom, was not getting enough nutrients. The placenta was calcifying, and she had IUGR, so she was a bit restricted in her growth. So they just wanted to go ahead and deliver the babies early, which was fine with us. We were very excited to meet them. So we did a C-section. Everything went great. About 10 minutes later, we were in recovery, and they brought the girls to meet us. We knew going into it that the twin A was probably going to be in the NICU because she was on the smaller side, and she didn't have any health complications. She did go in the NICU just because she was a little bit underweight. So they brought the girls out to meet us, and a doctor came in who we had never met. I guess he was the pediatrician at the hospital at the time, and he just very kindly says, "Did you know that your girls have several of the markers for Down syndrome?" And I don't even remember. I was in shock at that moment. I just had a C-section. I honestly do not remember what my response was other than complete shock.
Yeah, so literally 10 minutes after you given birth, you had this major surgery, you had this major life-altering news delivered, and you were just sitting there. I remember just shivering after, I guess, the epidural was still working through your body, and you were just received this massive news. Yeah. And I think the doctor kind of tiptoed a little bit around it, but ultimately delivered news that we had 2 children with Down syndrome.
Yeah, and they were pretty sure. They were pretty sure,
Yeah.
but they didn't want to just say it as bluntly as that, I think, in the moment. And I think looking back, I mean, we're 6 years removed from this. Looking back, I wish that I was able to say I just immediately received the news with grace and I accepted it and I knew exactly what Down syndrome was and I was totally fine with it. But that's simply not the case. I would say, and I tell this to new mothers that I'm talking to, it probably took me a good 1.5 years, 2 years to come out of the hole of grief that started at that moment. There's a few days of crying, and now that I've had 2 other pregnancies, I know that part of that's just the hormones that come after having a baby. But there was this added. I would wake up and forget for a minute, and then remember, and it would just wash over me all over again.
Yeah, sure.
I remember sitting in the bed the first night after the C-section and just Googling Down syndrome and what does it look like? Because I had one person in my life that I knew who had Down syndrome. I didn't know a lot of people with special needs. So I immediately started internet stalking people and I found a few accounts that were sharing what I thought was a false positive.
It's almost like they were trying to spin it.
Yeah, I thought that people were spinning Down syndrome, and then like they were just trying to like put this agenda out there that it was really great. And I later found out, and now that I do social media myself, it really is true.
Yeah,
just how wonderful they are. It's just a lot of information all at once.
Yeah,
and
you had you had like testing and all beforehand, right?
So we didn't do
some of the basic.
Yeah, so we did all the regular sonograms, all the regular testing. We did not do the NIPT test simply because our twins were completely separate from 7 weeks.
Yeah.
So we thought that if we got an NIPT test, for us, it would only have been to find out the gender.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we had no idea about special needs and that wasn't even on our radar.
Wasn't on your radar.
So we were like, well, there's no point in doing it because we won't know if they're completely separate. We wouldn't be able to tell. We would only be able to tell if they were both girls.
Yeah.
So we just waited for the what do they call it? The anatomy scan.
Yeah.
Nothing. No heart defects showed up. They have their nasal bone, which is a really common marker that people get a diagnosis through sonogram. They didn't have fluid in their neck. They didn't have any of the other kind of things that you can pick up on sonogram. So it's pretty common to get a birth diagnosis. 1 in 700 live births in the United States have a Down syndrome diagnosis.
Wow.
And I don't know the percentage on how many of those knew prenatally.
Gotcha.
But it is pretty common in our world.
Yeah. But, again, not something that was on your radar.
Yeah.
So you're adjusting to finding out that life's going to greatly change for you because you're going to have twins.
Right.
Yeah.
Not 1, but 2.
Yeah.
And not having been there myself, adjusting to 1, and it's a challenge in itself. And then adjusting to 2, but then you get this news, and I'm sure that just kind of rocked your world.
Oh, big time!
While.
Big time.
Yeah.
I kind of remember just sitting there trying to process it, and it wasn't quite going through.
Yeah.
And then I think I forced myself to accept it a little faster than Sarah, purely because I knew that both of us couldn't be in that space. And I remember, and I think I said to Sarah, I'm going to the car to get our other suitcase. And I just remember, I mean, I did need the suitcase, but I also knew that I just needed to go and cry for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just kind of got as much out of my system as I could.
Sure.
And just to come back and to be some semblance of a husband that would be helpful in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful you did that because I needed somebody in that, and you're the only person that I wanted to be that vulnerable with.
Sure. A lot about what we talk about on this show is faith too. And, thinking from perspective of we're Christians. We just got this bombshell of news, right? What role did your faith play in that? A lot of emotions, a lot of feelings. But where did faith come in that process? And
it was both helpful and a little confusing.
Yeah.
Helpful because our identity is in Christ and we know that He only has our best interest for us. The thing that kept coming to my mind was God doesn't make mistakes. God doesn't make mistakes. Just knowing the people who Katie and Madison are now, they're far from mistakes.
Yeah.
So that was maybe like kind of like a false image or false progression I had come to, and that in no way are they mistakes.
Yeah.
They're images of God.
Right.
Yeah, and it's much easier now that we're 6 years out of this. It's much easier to look back and see God's hand through all of it. But I would say for me, it wasn't a crisis of faith, but it was a time when I had to fully lean on God and even know that maybe sometimes I was questioning whether or not that was real.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's okay to question that God can take my questions and God can take my grief.
Yeah.
And he can take my anger and he can take all of the things that come along with that, and that it's okay. And I think it's part of having a healthy faith, asking questions and stuff like that. But I do remember we only had a few visitors in the hospital. We didn't want to have a lot of visitors. We had my parents came.
You're still processing this.
Yeah.
So.
And the only other person that we allowed to come up was our pastor at the time, Wayne and Virginia were our pastors, and Wayne was able to come. And I think he probably knew because he grew up in the special needs world.
Gotcha.
He has a sister who has special needs and has a real compassion for that. And just the way that he walked with us through it. He didn't say a word. He just loved on us and continued being his Pastor Wayne self. But I think that he knew looking back, and he was just helping us process that.
And, maybe even a divine appointment of sorts, having a pastor that you're serving under that kind of knows how to walk that path. So,
and
the church loved us. The place we were at, they really threw their arms around us, and we were very fortunate for that.
Yeah. Remember the whole first year we never bought diapers because whenever we got low, some would mysteriously show up on our doorstep just in time. And that was just a very physical way that people supported us
100%.
Going through all of that.
Yeah, it's so strange. Whenever I think of the faithfulness of God, I equate it with diapers, which is nuts.
Yeah.
But
it's such a small thing, but it meant so much.
It's a big thing.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously there's 2 kids and
you have kids,
they go to the bathroom a lot. And so it was, I mean, I want to say even up until like now, we've barely bought any diapers for the twins.
Wow.
I mean, they're still in diapers. They're almost 6, and there's some movement towards potty training, but we're still a ways away.
Yeah. We're still in diapers for a while.
Yeah, so it's kind of a neat thing, but also a very weird thing that I equate God's faithfulness with diapers.
Yeah.
Well, God shows His faithfulness with whatever our needs may be at that moment.
Yeah.
And that's been your need.
Yeah.
For quite a while.
Yeah.
So I also want to kind of go here too, because it's interesting. A lot of times people don't know what to say. Yeah. Whenever we have a loved one, family member, etc., that are dealing
platitudes.
With this. Yeah. So, were there some things that when you started telling people, and this is not from a place of shame and judgment. It's just from a place of awareness.
Right.
What are some common things that didn't help, or some platitudes that didn't help, and then maybe some better ways that we can approach coming alongside and loving. Our friends, our families.
Question. I think
this is a very common topic in the Down syndrome world. Yeah. I'd say first of all, the one phrase that people would commonly say to me that really rubbed me the wrong way was that they would say, "Well, God only gives kids with special needs to very special people," and that is not true. There is nothing special about William and I. We're just parents who want to love our kids and who follow a very special God. And God doesn't give people kids with special needs. He equips us when we're called.
Yeah.
Whenever we were given Katie and Madison, I don't feel like there was anything that we did to deserve that. There's nothing we could do to deserve those little girls. But along with having Down syndrome, there are a lot of challenges, and I feel like there's not any superhuman strength in us that made us go through those challenges. It's just been God's faithfulness and God continually equipping us.
It's not like you were prepared ahead of time. Like,
No.
Here's exactly what you need to know for this.
Yeah.
But it's all like along the way and in the moment, right?
Yeah. So that's one of the things that's not very helpful. But things that are helpful are just talking to them, to the kids and about the kids like regular people, offering physical help, offering to take a little
diapers.
bit of, diapers, offering to take some of the mental load off. If they're struggling with all the doctor's appointments or it's someone who just doesn't have the capacity for doing all of that, offer to sit down with them and go through the patient portals and figure out what they need to do. Or come and clean their house or something like that. Most of the time, my favorite interactions with people and our girls are whenever they look at them and they smile and they say, they are beautiful. They are perfect. Congratulations. That's all you need to say. If you're going to talk about someone with Down syndrome, don't call them a Down syndrome kid. Or say Down syndrome. Our girls' names are Katie and Madison. Don't say Down syndrome Madison. Or that Down syndrome baby.
Or the Downs baby.
Or the Downs baby.
That's not their identity.
It's a pretty common.
This isn't true for all disabilities, but in the Down syndrome world, we've asked adults with Down syndrome how they feel about this too. Just call them by their name. Use person first language, so use their name or the person with Down syndrome or that sort of thing.
Right. That's not their identity.
Exactly.
They're Katie and Madison. One of the things I've seen you talk about on social media is the whole like I'm sorry thing. People find out and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I feel like it's a very typical knee-jerk reaction. And it comes from a place of maybe not understanding people with disabilities or not being around them very much. I certainly, like myself, I wouldn't have known anything other than saying I'm sorry. Until we had our there's no shame.
There's no shame in it.
But how do we do better?
Educate yourself. That's the big thing. If you don't know people with disabilities, Down syndrome or anything, any other intellectual disabilities, just find a group near you that meets with people and get to know them.
Right. One of the worst things I think that can happen is often young kids have no filter and they'll say what's wrong with her or him, whatever. And parents often miss an opportunity, a really golden opportunity to explain what's going on. And so what often happens is that they'll like hurriedly shoo them away instead of like engaging us. So we love people coming up and asking questions about Katie and Madison. And I feel like a lot of the stigma can be just null and void once we like engage in conversation about it. And
it's something that's happening more and more with us now since our girls are more mobile, they're on playgrounds.
Getting more involved with things.
You get the question, or you hear them in the periphery, what's wrong with her? Why? Because they don't talk. Like, why doesn't she talk? Why does she make those noises? And
why is her eyes like that?
And it kind of breaks your heart whenever parents just go, shh, they're just born that way. They're just like that. That's maybe not the best approach. Maybe talk to your kids about it or ask the parents.
Well, like what you said, it's a golden opportunity.
It's the most social beings you'll ever meet.
And
in their own different ways.
So usually when someone, if there's a kid and their parent isn't with them and they ask me, like, why isn't she talking? Why does she yell at me? I'll just say they haven't figured out all of their words yet. That's how she's expressing herself. She's still learning. That's the language that we've used, like with our 3-year-old who can talk a mile a minute. Sisters are still learning how to do that, and it seems to be helpful because if they have people like that in their classroom, I want them to be welcoming to them as well. So,
100%. What are some of the challenges and developmental issues and different things that you guys have dealt with? Because we are talking about, education. What are some of the myths that maybe you've come across that people think about when it comes to special needs or Down syndrome that's not true? Just kind of want to give you an opportunity to provide some of that education, help us be better neighbors, better family members, better friends by educating us about some of those things.
Yeah, so I guess it's easiest to start with what Down syndrome is. It's when there's normally people have 46 chromosomes, right? And people with Down syndrome have a third copy of the 21st chromosome, which is called trisomy 21, and that gives them 47 chromosomes. And it involves the whole body. So you have the health aspect of it. 50% of people with Down syndrome will have heart disease.
Yeah.
Both of our girls have it, and there's some things that just correlate with Down syndrome. There's going to be a global developmental delay. There's usually some like motor issues, occupational, like fine motor, gross motor, all of those things. And the kind of big thing that people see the most is called hypotonia.
Okay.
It's low muscle tone, which basically just means they have to work really, really, really hard to do the things that we just take for granted.
Yeah.
Like keeping your tongue in your mouth.
Yeah.
Things like that take a lot of extra effort for people.
Things we don't think about.
Yeah. Things that are just automatic for us.
Right.
So with our girls, Katie and Madison, they are identical twins. Both have Down syndrome. They both have just regular trisomy 21. There's a few other ones that have less of the developmental delay side.
Now, walk us through a little bit about, so you mentioned they're twins, and they both have Down syndrome.
Yeah.
It's a pretty rare thing, right?
Yeah.
Extremely.
I actually just got to go to a conference a couple weeks ago, and I stayed in a room with 5 other moms who have twins that both have Down syndrome, and it was so cool.
Oh, wow.
Because it's not common.
So
it's
rare.
very rare for us. It was a 1 in 1.26 million chance.
Literally 1 in a million.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very rare. Like, there's plenty of people who have twins, but they're fraternal, and one has it and one doesn't.
Right.
But to have both, it's unheard of. So yeah, they both have it. And for the heart defect, Katie had a more severe one. So she had to have heart surgery at 4 months. And along with that went a lot of feeding issues. She was too weak to feed, and then she had an aversion. And so her growth has been a little bit slower than Madison's, even though they're twins. Madison had a hole in her heart that resolved itself within a year. So her health issues have been very minor.
Yeah. So then, backtracking a little bit here, but just kind of drawing the full picture. So, twins, and then surprise, Down syndrome, and then like Katie had open heart surgery.
Yeah.
4 months old.
4 months old.
Yeah.
So, it's just a lot at one time.
Yeah. Like I said, that first 18 months was a lot of grief, moving through what we had expectations in our mind of what our children would be, and moving through that into acceptance of they are perfect exactly how they are.
Yeah. But it's that sense of grief.
Yes.
It's a loss of sorts. It's a loss of what your expectations were.
Absolutely. I almost felt at one point, I was like, I've lost my children.
Yeah. Well,
and I had all these expectations I didn't know I had. Completely dashed. Yeah. And so we had to work through that.
Yeah.
And then pretty much straight away, around 2 months, Katie developed failure to thrive. She stopped eating. Heart was going so fast just to pump oxygen, because she had so many large holes in her heart.
Right.
And so we were put straight on the list for open heart surgery. They wanted to wait as long as possible so she could become stronger with age. But at 4 months, they were like, we can't wait any longer. This has to be resolved. And so, at 4 months old, she had an SD, VSD repair, open heart surgery. She has the zipper going from her right here all the way down to her middle of her chest. And
I'll be honest, that's how I told them apart.
That's what we still tell people, that pull down our shirt a little bit. There's a scar.
The zipper scar. Yeah. And so while we were mentally processing that, we also had to take care of the physical, then and there, immediate need.
Like the world doesn't stop.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
And and this isn't a pity thing, but it's just a realistic view of what that looks like.
Absolutely.
And I think there's possibly some people listening that can really relate to that. And I think it's important to kind of just put that out there and say, hey, this is normal. It's normal to have these thoughts. It's normal to have these feelings. You don't have to feel bad about it. It's just us as humans and how we process them.
Yeah, and that's why I think what we do on social media, what several of our friends do on social media, is so important, because, like I said, we got this diagnosis at birth.
Yeah.
Could you imagine being pregnant, being an expectant father, getting this news, and then processing through all of this before your baby's even born?
Yeah.
I think it is so important that we talk about, yes, this is hard. This was a hard time, but look at them now.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just being honest, the abortion rate in America, 60% if a person finds out they have Down syndrome.
Yeah.
60%.
I remember when we were pregnant with Hannah, we had asked about the genetic test, and our physician was very, he's a Christian guy, and he was just very honest with us. He said, "Would it change anything?" And we said, "Not really. Yeah, it wouldn't change the end."
Yeah.
And we're like,
yeah, they definitely have their place.
We're not worried about it, and it's not saying that you should or shouldn't.
Yeah.
But realizing that that's a reality. A lot of people find out about this diagnosis and they're like, I don't want to go through this.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason for this awareness campaign is let's look at the joys.
Yeah,
for sure. Man, life without Katie Madison,
that would be no life at all.
Pretty bland. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to be fair, I had that test with our following pregnancies. Because I got that birth diagnosis and did not want to be shocked again. It wouldn't have changed anything, like you said.
Right.
But I didn't want to be. I wanted to be prepared.
Be prepared.
Yeah, but I think that's why awareness is so important to show people that we're also here for you. There's a
big community.
There's a group called the Down Syndrome Diagnosis Network, and their slogan is "You've got this, and we've got you."
Oh, cool.
And I think that we, as Christians, as people of faith, need to adopt that slogan. That whatever you're going through, whether it's a diagnosis of a kid with special needs, whether it's whatever you're going through in life, you've got it, and we've got you. And we can come alongside you. And having a community has been the best way to move through grief for me personally.
Well, it's people who understand. You're not navigating this alone. We weren't made to do life alone.
No,
we weren't made to handle difficult situations alone. And we have the power of a community, the power of people who have been there, done that, and understand exactly what you're going through.
Yeah.
And it's not just a community, it's a large community.
Yeah.
So like, as Sarah said, 1 in 700 births result in kids with Down syndrome.
Yeah. Do the math.
But that is just Down syndrome.
Yeah. That's not.
You think of all the...
In just America.
Right.
But like I'm saying, autism, CP, all the different diagnoses people get, it adds up. It is not a small chunk of community. It's often hidden for various reasons, but it is not a small community. You are not alone. There are groups there can help you and walk with you. There is church families who can help pick you up.
And I'll add some links in the show notes too of some organizations that you guys have found to be helpful. People out there need all the resources they can get. And so
kids with Down syndrome specifically, it usually takes a little bit longer to get those gross motor skills, crawling, walking, sitting up, or sitting up, crawling, walking. And it takes a lot more practice. Fine motor skills take a lot more practice, and speech. One of the common misconceptions is that people with Down syndrome have a lower intelligence or they can't speak. That's not necessarily true. Often what we're seeing as a lower intelligence is a disconnect between their body and their brain. There's been new studies coming out, and I'm just learning about some new areas of study, talking about how this low muscle tone affects their speech in such a way that it makes them seem like they don't have anything to say. But there are researchers and doctors who are doing really good advances in this. There's a thing called the Global Down Syndrome Medical Research, and they are doing specific studies on people with Down syndrome to see how they can help break that down, how they can either use pharmaceuticals, like they can use medicines, they can use therapies, whatever they can use to help bridge that brain body, whatever that disconnect is that's making them not be able to talk. And so I went to this conference and I learned all about this thing, the Speller's method. I learned all this different stuff. It was really cool. And I came home and I tried it out on Katie because I was like, come on.
Guinea pig.
Because one of the things that the speaker said was, don't ever count something as a fluke. And I do that all the time. I see Katie say something or I see her do something and I count it as a fluke. That was one time.
Do it again.
Yeah, because when she equated it to, if you ran a marathon and then someone said, "Oh, I saw you did that. Do it again to show me you can do it."
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes when there is a disconnect between the brain and the body, it's like asking them to run a marathon again to say that word again.
Right.
So I found this little picture board and asked her to show me a banana, and she can point to the banana.
Wow.
You ask her to show you something, she can point to it.
Yeah.
And she might not do a clear point, but she points in the direction, and you can tell that she knows what she's talking about. Or you offer her two choices, she will choose which one she wants. She has very clear opinions. Both of the girls do. But because they're not speaking it verbally, a lot of people just assume they don't have anything to say.
Yeah, because they don't use vocabulary doesn't mean they don't understand vocabulary.
Yeah.
I would say that their bank of words that they can understand is huge.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I mean, they may only be able to say 10 words or 10 very small phrases, but they understand a whole lot more.
Yeah, and speech is one of the ways we express ourselves, but it's not the only way we express ourselves.
Right. There's lots of
And so, I imagine, I'm not an expert in this, but I imagine that creating other avenues of expression would be important with them as well. So, whether it be artistic, or whether it be, musically or whatever, I know that there's songs that they like, and they like a lot.
They know every word of them.
They're Disney girls for sure.
Yeah. And so it's just kind of one of the ways that I've noticed that they tend to express themselves. It's not an IQ issue. It's a speech issue.
Yeah.
And those aren't the same.
Yeah. And like I said, none of us are experts on this specifically. But we're experts on our kids.
Yeah.
I think we know what works for our kids. And I think understanding that they know more than they speak opens up a whole new world of communication for me. So I'm able to talk to them and know that they have opinions on things, and that helps our therapists as well.
What's going on in that brain of yours?
Yeah. And so speech is a big issue. It's a big point where people tend to think that they have a lower IQ because of the speech issue. So they have the low tone really affects everything: speech, physical, gross motor, fine motor. And so whenever the girls were less than 2 months old, we had people come into our house doing these assessments to see if they needed physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, etc.
Feeding therapy.
Yeah. And that's just been part of our lives. That's one of the things
you probably didn't know existed.
Right.
Yeah, not for kids. I thought of PT as being after you break your leg, you go to PT.
For an infant. Right.
Yeah. So that's one of those things that you don't really know until you know.
Yeah.
And one of the burdens that special needs parents do carry is the appointment load.
Yeah.
So at least once a week, usually more like 3, 4, 5 times a week, you have appointments or therapists. I will say, for any of you guys listening who have babies and are listening to this, it gets so much better as they get older. It definitely, the load lessens, at least for our family, it has.
Awesome. Yeah. The first 18 months are very intense. It does get better. First 18 months, it was almost like I'm having a full-time job, going to different therapies and doctor's appointments and specialists and follow-ups for everything, and keeping up with insurances and all that kind of different stuff. So
yes, we have been very blessed in the fact that Florida had a great system where the girls had state insurance from the time they were born. Down syndrome was an automatic qualifier for that.
Gotcha.
And then now that we live in Arizona, it's even better. The medical system is really great here, and we're so thankful. There aren't a lot of states that are good or are geared towards people with disabilities. And at the conference I was just at, I was talking to people from all over, and they couldn't believe that we get medical covered because they have a permanent disability.
It's a major deal.
Yeah.
Especially
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
when you're talking about all the appointments that are necessary.
Yeah.
And
that
like financial barrier. Otherwise,
I mean, the heart operation alone for Katie would have bankrupt us.
Yeah,
we'd have lost everything. But it was necessary.
Yeah.
So
how can you not give her heart surgery?
Right.
So that's another thing that we talk about on social media a lot.
Advocacy.
because if you don't know about it or you're not in that world, you don't realize the need for it.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of states who they might have a medical waiver system. I was talking to one person, don't remember which state she was from, but she was saying that they have a waiver system where if you have insurance, you have to apply to get on the waiver system, which would take care of those bills, right? Mm-hmm. But the waiting list is 3 years to apply for the waiver.
Wow.
So by that time, you've racked up, you've gone bankrupt.
Yeah.
So how do you take care of your family?
It's not all that helpful.
No, not very helpful. In two very good states, and we love where we're at for that.
I would encourage you to check that out in the state you're living in, and I mean that's a big place for advocacy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a huge factor for us whenever we knew we were leaving Florida. Honestly, it was a huge determining factor. Can we move to this state? Can we move to that state?
Yeah, and it shouldn't be, but
right, yeah,
but it is.
Yeah.
One of the things you'd mentioned is that there are these commonalities between all the different milestone issues, the developmental issues. But one of the things we've been mentioning was that each journey is unique. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. There are generalizations that can be made about people with Down syndrome, but each journey is definitely unique. We have twins. We have 2 kids, and their journeys are unique. They are identical. Every chromosome in their body is identical, but their journeys have been completely different. Yeah. You have Katie, who had open heart surgery at 4 months. Her weight gain and her muscle tone has been a lot slower than Madison's. Madison's maybe 3 inches taller, 5 pounds heavier than Katie. And they learn differently as well. You could talk to someone like Madison, who didn't have surgery as a baby, and her development has just progressed in a different way. It's not really good or bad. It's not like this one's been worse or this one's been better.
Yeah.
It's just different. Realizing that you can't compare my kid to my friend's kid.
Yeah. Right.
You just can't. It's apples and oranges.
So knowing that like every kid has its own journey, like that's so true for even our kids. You shouldn't compare, but you can't help not compare your kids to other kids, especially those who have Down syndrome, because like it's human nature. You want to see, are they keeping up? Are they doing things well? Are they doing things not well? Like for example, our kiddos, they thrive. Like physically, they do really well in terms of hitting benchmarks and milestones. Like they can run backwards. They can.
I can't even do that.
Right. They can climb independently on the playground. They can walk upstairs independently, and that's not the case for a lot of kids with Down syndrome, especially at their age. But yet on the other side, some other kids are progressing better academically than our kids are.
It's really easy to fall into the comparison trap. If you let yourself just go down that hole of comparison, you'll find yourself in a really dark place, and it's just not helpful. It's not helpful to you as a parent, and it's not helpful to your kid because they're just being their best little self.
Right.
And it's not really fair to compare them to others.
One of the things that I've mentioned to you before was that it's kind of been a learning process for me. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this, is because my experience with Down syndrome and special needs has been limited. Just really haven't surrounded myself with that community, and not on purpose. It's just the way that's happened. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there, and it's easy to kind of to see people, and this is a blanket statement across the board, but it's easy to see people that are different from you as other
or less,
or less, and then there's almost this fear component.
For sure,
that comes along with it, like with their different.
For sure.
And I think a lot of times we just don't know how to interact. We don't know what to say. We don't know. We're just unsure, and so when we're unsure, we retreat. Or either we say the platitudes that aren't helpful.
So a kind of a fun example of this in action is, so on every third Friday of the month, we at our church we do something called the All Stars Club. It's basically a free night of respite for caregivers, where caregivers who just don't get breaks, they can drop off a loved one, knowing that there's going to be a buddy for them to like just have a blast with them for 3 hours, so the parents can go on a date night or go shop or have just some semblance of peace at home by themselves. And the people we get to have as buddies, a lot of them have zero experience with special needs, just like you were talking about, and there is a fear component. What am I going to do? How am I going to interact with these people? I have nothing in common with them. When reality, once the night is over, they're just smiling from they're complete. They've had the best night of their lives, basically. They've had so much fun interacting, because it isn't hard to be kind and show a little extra patience. Right.
Yeah. Whenever so we've been doing this for a year and a half now, the All Stars Club, and it's once a month. So we're, naturally you need volunteers. So you're always asking for volunteers. And what I tell them is, if you come one time, if you just come one time, you will be hooked, and you will be there every single month. And it's held pretty true.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that, because, it's connecting people. It's normalizing these conversations, these interactions, and making it to where, hey, we're bringing those barriers down and allowing people to show love to people who are just joys.
Yeah.
And so that kind of that's a natural segue into, I wanted to talk about your experience here. And you've started the All Stars program. And so I want to give you space to talk about that and what that is, and then talk about your new ministry roles. And so, God has kind of, you mentioned God equips you as you go, and life looks different than maybe how you thought it might 6 years ago. But there are no accidents. God always knows what he's doing. And I think this is a big testament of that. So I want to give you guys a, kind of an intro into, what are you doing here? How has that worked in the ministry world?
Like I was saying, to start with, we are at a place in our lives where we never, ever could have seen ourselves 10 years ago when we got married. We came out to Arizona for a family ministry job. So basically children's pastors, family pastors. That's what we've been doing for the past 3 years. As a result of having Katie and Madison, we began to see the rising need for incorporating people with special needs into every single part of church life. So we've been doing that as family pastors. We've been making sure that when people come to the church who have a disability, we make space for them. We have conversations with the parents and see how best to help them thrive in whatever ministry area they're at. And along with that, we would hold holiday events, fall festivals, Christmas things, Easter Fest. So one year when we were doing Easter Fest, we got an email a couple weeks later in Colorado who said, "I saw that you made space for people with special needs and you intentionally welcomed that community into this festival. I run a program called All Stars Club and love to talk to you about it." So we did FaceTime. We went out to Colorado, saw it in action, and I think it's just grown from there. So we started doing All Stars Club once a month as a respite event, and that's mainly for people 8 and up. But the more that we get into the special needs community, both as parents with our girls, and then as advocates and as pastors, the more we realize there's a need for everyone to be included. One of the taglines that you came up with was that every person is not only capable
of worship.
Not only capable of worship, but we're all designed to worship. So we've come to the conclusion that, well, if we're going to be the people of Jesus, we need to welcome everybody. I know it's revolutionary, never been heard of before. Wasn't like
familiar.
Wasn't like Jesus talked about this or anything, but in our lives, we've
doing it.
We finally come to the realization that if we're gonna talk about it, we need to do it. So we had a conversation with our lead pastors earlier this year, and they just were saying that they kind of recognized this in us, that we have a passion for welcoming everyone and intentionally including people with special needs, and asked us to go full time with it. So we prayed about it and said yes. So now we're working as the special needs pastors here at Crossroads, and we're honestly still figuring out what that means. It's not something that you can just jump into and say, this is what we're going to do. You have to.
There's not a lot of precedent for that, right?
No, there's not a lot of precedent. And so we're trying our best in the last few months and in the few months ahead to listen, to hear from the community, not just the Down syndrome community, but from our local setting, what people want.
Yeah. What is the need?
What is the need?
We're trying not to presume a need, even though all you hear is just heartbreaking stories about people who have tried to come to church, but being unintentionally ostracized. They bring their kids to church with them. If they're young enough, they go to the kids ministry, and more often than not, within 5 minutes, the parents are called to come get their kids because the space isn't ready for them, or they don't have. There's just not an equipping or a plan in place, so it just means that people who want to go to church find it really difficult for a number of reasons.
Yeah. Which I would like to add a disclaimer in there. This has not been our personal family's experience.
Correct.
We've been welcomed at both churches that we've been at since the girls were born, and the people here at Crossroads have just welcomed our family in. But we have a lot of friends in the community, and not all of them have had the same experience, and it breaks my heart to see people who say, I will never darken the door of a church again because my kid's not welcome. And it could be something as simple as you have a 5-year-old who's not potty trained, and the church's policy is that they only do diapers till 3 years old, or something like that. There's all kinds of nuance to it, but the overarching theme is we want to make not only our church here accessible for everyone, but we want to help make a dent in the societal issue of welcoming everyone. So if we can help other churches in the area to figure out how to do this thing without tons of money or tons of resources, just how to welcome people and how to make space, we want to do that.
What's the biggest challenge with that you've come across, or that you've kind of worked through and navigated through?
Mental space.
Okay.
It's people's perception. A lot of people have this idea that having people with special needs on their campus is going to cause legal issues or liability issues or things like that, and they don't realize how easy it is.
Are you going to need to triple your volunteer base?
Triple your staff or whatever. And it's not always the case. It's easier to welcome than you think. And so it's just overcoming those barriers, having the conversation, saying all you need is a safe space here. You need to maybe add a few additional locks. You need to add a buddy system in place, those kinds of things. To be fair, some of the best buddies we found are high school students. Wow. People who you would think would be rude and exclusive. When it comes to the special needs world, we found high school students just have it for it. And
big hearts.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, if there's a couple of things that you really want to hone in on that you want to be kind of key takeaways for our listeners, what might those couple of things be?
So the one for me is something kind of that William brought up earlier. If you're of the opinion that this doesn't affect you, you're wrong. It does. There are people in your community who have disabilities hidden or visible. I believe the stat is that there's 16 million Americans who live with intellectual disabilities. It does affect you. Yeah. They're part of your community and they want to be welcome. Do what you can. Yeah. Learn, educate yourself. Go join a respite club like All Stars Club. Just get involved.
Yeah.
Two things. One, kiddos with Down syndrome, adults with Down syndrome, they're not stupid. They're very capable people. Second thing was kindness, patience, and a little planning goes a whole long way.
Yeah. It does.
And most of that's free.
Yeah.
Most of that is free. Yeah. Like I said, we are definitely far from experts, but I feel that our experience is valuable in being able to say that if you come across someone who gets a diagnosis, if you're a doctor, if you're in the medical profession and you're giving this diagnosis to someone, keep our girls in mind. Keep families like ours in mind. Don't deliver it with the I'm sorry or a picture of how their life is going to be. Don't hit them with the 50% of your kids are going to have heart defects. So present the facts.
Yeah, they'll figure that out.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Present the facts. But if you are a person delivering that news, deliver a news of hope.
Yeah.
Show them real stories of people. There are adults who get married who have Down syndrome. They have jobs. They go to college. They drive. They do everything that other adults do, but a lot of times they just don't see it because we're not looking for it.
And the quality of life is only getting better.
Yeah.
As time goes on, as medical advancements goes on, as therapies get better, all the good stuff.
Yeah. I believe the stat was that in the 80s, the life expectancy was 25 for a person with Down syndrome. Now it's well over 60, simply because they don't discriminate against people with Down syndrome in the medical field.
So, well, this has been a blast. I appreciate you guys kind of joining me. It's been neat to see your story unfold over these last few years, and I've just really, really been encouraged by the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. Thank you for being beacons and for kind of shining that light for those that need it. And I wanted to give you an opportunity. You do put out a lot of really cool content on social media. So where can people find you guys to follow you, to get more of those insights and to get more education?
Yeah, so I kind of started just a couple of years ago making reels because, I mean, come on, guys, our girls are adorable. And they're really smart and funny and intelligent and all of these things. But we mainly do socials just to get the word out there, to normalize Down syndrome and to do that. We call ourselves Down with the Robinsons. I ripped it from a friend who had, I'm not going to say her name on here, but she had Down with it. And I thought that's really cute. Yeah. So we are at Down with the Robinsons on Facebook, Instagram. I do a little bit on TikTok. Yeah, give us a follow, share reels, learn something new every day.
Fall in love with the girls.
Yeah, they're really easy to fall in love with.
Well, there's kind of the point of this is that there's a seat at the table for everyone. Mm-hmm. And you guys are making that happen, especially in this community. So love it. Thank you guys, and love you guys as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the RevRx Podcast. We hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if so, we'd love it if you would hit that subscribe button so that you'll never miss a new episode from us. Also, feel free to leave us reviews and comments, as we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed and be the very best you.